All set over there, Eric?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah? Okay. Ready, Randy? All right. Power, stay on.
You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello, patrons. Welcome to this episode of Addressing Gettysburg. And I have with me someone that I'm sure a lot of you have at least seen his name. Many of you might have actually met him, taken a tour that he has put together, or somehow come across the name Randy Drace. He is an author. He's got a website. He's got so much, a newsletter, so much stuff that he has to offer, and all of it's very good, very interesting. And welcome for the second time to the show, Randy.
Thank you, Matt. It's a pleasure being here.
We had you here like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and the power went out. And this audience is very familiar with our power going out because it's happened before on shows that we've done live on, Facebook or something.
Okay.
And the power just goes out. We had Bo Brinkman from the movie here, and power just went out right in the middle of it. And so that's not unusual, but it is very annoying when it happens because then you have to do it again. So I'm glad that we finally got this together so that we can do it again. So, Randy, first, let's start with how you got into the Civil War or Gettysburg or the whole thing. I mean, is this a lifelong passion of yours?
Well, I would say since age 12. And it is the result of a bus trip from school, from my school district in York. And we're only about an hour from here. And this was back in the early 60s, when bus trips were still pretty predominant for educational purposes. And our world cultures or American history class, Charles Richards was the teacher, and I still remember his name, and it was a trip to the battlefield here. And I remember the first stop, and it was a cloudy day like today, and the first stop was at the John Burns statue. That's where the bus stopped.
Okay.
And that's about all I remember. I just remember being so enamored with the stories and the accounts that I started reading every book in the school library and looking into any source that I could find, and had my dad come over here on the weekends, much to my sister's dismay, for picnics where we would drive across the battlefield, and I would make my little notations of this particular regiment or this battlefield or July 1st, 2nd, 3rd, Pickett's charge. So my sisters were not enamored with the picnics. But that's how I got involved with it. And my father worked for a glass installation company, windows and doors and stuff.
Okay.
And the company he worked for actually had the contract for at least some of the doors and windows in the old visitor center.
Okay.
And he said, "Do you want to play hooky one day?" And I said, "Sure." So I got to walk through, in and around the old Cyclorama Visitor Center before it was built in '62.
Okay, yeah.
So that's how I got interested in it.
That's cool.
And after I got married, I had all these books, articles, magazines, and my wife said, "You got to do something with all this information." She called it something else. And I just read a magazine or a newspaper article in USA Today. It was in November, actually, of one year, like 2007, and it said about how to create your own website. I said, okay. So that was the impetus behind creating the website.
And the website is battleofgettysburgbuff.com.
Right. And I put it together. It is for people that want to learn the lesser known stories, locations, monuments, markers, that type of thing. It's not an overview of the battle. There are enough sources out there for that. But if you want to know about Colonel Horatio Howe, the 90th Pennsylvania, the chaplain who was killed on the steps on Gettysburg Street,
Christ Lutheran Church.
That's one piece of it.
Sure.
But that's the type of information that I had on it. And before I launched it March of 2008, because it took about a year, 6 months or so to put it together, I sent it to some good friends of mine, Eric Wittenberg,
Okay.
J.D. Petruzzi, Jim McClure, who is the author of East of Gettysburg, because he's in New York and a newspaper editor, whatever. I sent it to him to see what he thought. And I also sent it to Tom Flegel, who has the History Buff's Guide to Gettysburg, the Battle of Gettysburg. So I sent that to them, and I said, see what you think. And does it flow well? Does it make sense? Do you have any questions? Did you find any errors and whatever? And everyone said, it's great. It flows well. It looks wonderful. I like what you're attempting to do. And the only negative thing I got was from the technical department at the York Daily Record, when Jim McClure said, I think it's fabulous, it's wonderful, and I took the liberty of sharing it with the technical department, and they thought it worked well and everything. The only thing they didn't like was the shade of blue I used. So,
What, for the cover?
well, for the lettering,
for the
letters,
yeah.
the colors the color blue, the shade of blue. I'm like, well, if that's the only criticism I get for the launching of that, I can live with that.
Yeah, really.
And over the years, I've had a lot of people find the website, and nobody has found an error. I'm going to knock on wood here. They will provide additional information, which helps out. For example, A.L. Coble, who has the carving there at Spangler's Meadow.
Yeah.
A descendant of his saw the website and said, I saw the section on that carving, and I said, would you like a photograph of my ancestor? His name was Augustus Lucian. So I said, definitely. So that's how I get information like that I can add. And I do updates at least every other year with more information and what have you. And I'll be updating it again with the demise of the Sphinx.
Yes.
And that type of thing. So
now, because you also do a newsletter. Mm-hmm. So did the newsletter start back when you had the website, or was that something that you decided to add later on? How did that come about?
Well, it was the third thing. The second thing I did after the website was after I got an invitation from Eric Wittenberg to join Facebook. I'm like, what is Facebook?
Yeah.
So
it's the scourge of humanity is what it is.
We'll save that for another topic.
Yeah.
That's when I created my Battle of Gettysburg Buff Facebook page, which put information out. And
do you find that you get more nowadays? Do you get more activity on the Facebook page or on the website?
The Facebook page, actually.
Yeah. Websites are kind of obsolete.
Unless you're looking for it or Googling, and
you want a lot of information. Yeah.
But I've seen a lot of people find, if they're Googling a photograph of so-and-so, they'll email me and say, I was doing research on XYZ and I found your photograph from your website. May I use it? And I said, sure, as long as you give me photo credits.
Sure.
So that's where I get more of my contacts, or people that say, I'm coming to Gettysburg. Can you tell me more specifically how to get to the little marker for Major Joshua Palmer on Culp's Hill and that type of thing? And I give them specific details. Or I'll say, if you're coming to town, let me know, and I'll take you over there. Mm-hmm. So you save you some time and trouble. So, and that type of thing. But the next thing then became the newsletter. That was in 2011. So this spring was the 10th year of starting the newsletter.
And the newsletter comes out quarterly,
correct?
Right? And what do you like to include in the newsletter, typically?
Well, I have several sections. One, it starts off with basic info on the website and the newsletter, how many people follow it, and the different states. It's now up to 43 states and 10 foreign countries, including Australia, and Thailand
Wow.
and Japan. And
is this physically mailed like in the old days, or is it?
It's an email.
It's an email, okay.
And it averages around 30 pages. So some people say you should call it a news magazine as opposed to a newsletter.
Yeah, there you go.
But I like to include a lot of photographs, and that includes some photographs from people that either they submit or I see on different Facebook pages that I think has a beautiful photograph that you don't normally see.
Right.
May I use it with your permission? So that's the lead-in section. Then I talk about the park, what's going on around the park, an update on the COVID-19, the upcoming winter lectures if it's still on, that type of thing.
Do you? These are free. Anybody can get it, or is there a charge?
No, the newsletter is free.
So it's a free newsletter, and anybody can get on it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't mean in the newsletter, but I mean anybody can become a. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you.
Yeah, I just ask them to email me, and I put it out on my Facebook page and other Gettysburg-related Facebook pages when I say the winter edition is about to go out, and it will include information on this, and this. If you are not already a subscriber or your email address has changed, please email me, and I'll put you on the list.
Okay.
But that's about up to 1,315 subscribers.
Nice.
And the other sections are like what's going on around town, the events. We got a lot of the illumination, that type of thing. Updates left and right.
So just keeping people all around the country and the world informed about what's going on here in Gettysburg.
Yes.
People love this town, and they love to know what's going on when they're not here. You know, they it's like the home away from home for a lot of people. So all that stuff, even if it doesn't have anything to do with the history, just what's happening in town, they love it, and it's pretty cool. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there are other towns in the world that people have that affinity for and admire it from afar and visit as often as they can. But I don't know. There's something pretty cool about Gettysburg in that regard. Okay, so you also do tours and battle walks. You did.
Yes, and yes. Let me back up 1 second on the newsletter.
Okay.
One section that I really enjoy, and I think people enjoy, is I call it the In the Spotlight.
Right.
And it's an interview of about 10 to 15 questions of authors, descendants of soldiers. I've interviewed
podcasters.
Podcasters.
You haven't sent me the questions
You're on
yet.
the list. I'm working on that. I interviewed two descendants of General James Longstreet.
Oh, that's cool.
Who they were actually on a tour of mine, which I'll talk about in a minute since you brought that up.
Okay.
I think the last in the interview was a dual interview with two female guides, licensed battlefield guides, Deb Novotny and Jessie Weedleton.
Oh, they've both been
that
on the
was
show.
like comparison. How has it changed over time? That type of thing. So that's one of my favorite ones, and it's a lot of fun putting together. I compile the info in advance as much as I can, so they don't have to rewrite or start from scratch.
Right.
And it's fun.
Yeah. The tours, though, you do them on the battlefield, but also places like the Museum of Civil War Medicine and what is it? The flag preservation facility up in Harrisburg, right?
Yes.
Now, tell us about that a little bit, because that's something that we've heard about and we're kind of intrigued by.
The flag preservation
facility. Yeah.
Not all.
What, Eric?
Oh,
Yeah.
Not all of the Union states, for lack of a better phrase, have facilities like that.
Right.
West Virginia does. Indiana does. I'm not sure of any others, and I'm sure they do have some. But Pennsylvania, fortunately for us, they have over 370 flags, and about 20 of them are Spanish-American war flags.
Oh, that's cool.
As well.
Oh, that's
but
neat.
they have the guidons, they have, you name it. It's just an amazing place. And they put everything into a new facility about 2 years ago, right before COVID hit. So it took about a year.
It's on Pine Street now, isn't it? Or Forest
I think
Street.
So.
Forest Street.
Yeah, we
Something
come in
like
off of Walnut and Forester.
Okay.
Yeah.
Some kind of a tree.
There you go.
Something having to do with a tree.
But it's a very nice facility, and I had been taking people up there for the last couple of years in the older facility, and I've continued doing that.
And can anybody just go, or do you have to like make an appointment, or how's it work?
Well, I put on the newsletter and or on Facebook. I said, we're doing this. If you want to come along, let me know, and we'll put you on the list, and we'll take it from there. But then I also say, here's the link to them, their facility. So if you want to do your tour on your own, here's your contact person.
Mm-hmm.
But what's really nice is I'm able to take people along that have an ancestor that fought in the 11th Pennsylvania. And 9 times out of 10, they're able to actually see their ancestors' battle flag.
Yeah, that they fought under. That's pretty cool.
And like you said, other trips, National Civil War Museum. We've been down to Antietam to see the caves of Killiansburg, where about 350 civilians hid during the fighting.
Mm-hmm.
Just all kinds of different things. We've done rebuilding stone walls at McClelland Cemetery behind the Black Horse Tavern.
Right. Didn't you do that recently?
Yes.
Yeah, because I think
Yes.
Veronica went on that.
Yes, she did.
Yeah.
Her and her mother.
Yep.
That was in April.
Right.
It was the back wall. We had done the 2 side walls 2 years prior to that, but this one required a backhoe. So it took a while to get things organized because it was a 40-foot long wall, and it was overgrown and taken over. So
Can you imagine my girl Kathy building a stone wall? Man,
Hey, man. Yeah, Kathy's tough, man.
she really
She probably
is my
carried
hero.
the rocks on her shoulders.
Man, absolutely.
Yeah.
well, we should have had her name beforehand and we would have put her to work.
Well, he's talking about Veronica's mom, Kathy.
Yeah, Kathy.
Okay.
Kathy's my hero.
She seems very quiet and demure, but be careful.
She has her moments.
Yeah.
She sure does.
So you do Antietam, Gettysburg, everything like that. I find this interesting. I think I said this to you last time before the power went out. I kind of see what you've done as the precursor to what we're doing, just with a different medium.
Mm-hmm.
We do the podcast, and that's basically our website, all the information that we want to put out there, because I'm too lazy to write. Let's be honest. I'm too lazy to sit there and type. So we talk, and then we put it out there. That's the main thing that we do. But then we do tours and and things, and we try to keep things as free as we can so that it doesn't prohibit anybody from coming. It's not always possible, but for the most part, that's what we try to do. And there's so much to see. There's so much to do and learn. And I find, and I'm sure you agree, that getting out there in the middle of it all, being able to feel the ground under your feet and hear about what happened there is far more moving and a much better experience than just driving through, listening to a CD or something like that and never getting out.
Exactly, because if you're not out there in the middle of the terrain, you can't appreciate the hills, the swales, the flatness,
Right.
where you're total,
The view.
or the view.
I mean, you don't know what they could see and they couldn't see,
and you're a sitting duck,
Yeah.
and that type of thing.
And that's the thing about going across the Pickett's Charge Field that's so moving is that everything completely disappears once in a while.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
But I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, that's okay. But for 9 years, I did battlefield tours, Gettysburg campaign tours. And on the battlefield, I used licensed battlefield guides, of course.
Yeah.
But off the battlefield itself, I used authors. We did the Confederate occupation of York with York author Scott Mingus. We did the Confederate approach on Wrightsville with Scott Mingus.
Mm-hmm.
That was the biggest tour that I had, was 67 people. And that was an interesting caravan. We didn't lose one car.
So wait, that's 67 people and you're
20
driving
cars.
from point to point.
Yes.
That is impressive. Yeah. We had 76 on our tour last month, but no, we call it the get out of the car tour.
Right.
Because we don't want to deal with caravans. Also, I think, getting out and walking is the way to do it. But yeah, I can't imagine that. One time we took a bus and it caught on fire. We almost died. Oh, no, it didn't catch on fire. We thought it caught on fire, but it was just an antifreeze leak. But it scared everybody in the back.
I can imagine.
But yeah, so yeah, 20 people or 20 cars. Yeah. And you didn't lose anybody.
No, and we had the other really long one, or one of the other long ones, was we did Gettysburg the movie. And we used licensed battlefield guide Phil Cole, who was an extra in the movie.
Yeah.
We started off that day with a PowerPoint program with his slides, or PowerPoint program.
From when he was in the movie?
From when he was in the movie. We had some very interesting stories and accounts. And then we went out and we visited locations that were in the movie.
Yes.
Including the hillside where they filmed Joshua Chamberlain's charge.
Now, is that out at the farm where they used to have the reenactment?
It's further down.
Okay.
And it's on private property. You have to get permission there.
Right.
Phil would know how to get there.
Because there was a reenactment, I think it was the 135th that I was at, and they had the Union line was in front of this hill. And I remember there was a spectator area on the hill behind them, and that's where we stood to watch Pickett's charge as they came across the field. And it always kind of reminded me of that hill that he was on in the movie when he gave that speech, but I guess maybe it isn't. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, I'll take you there.
Okay, that'd be great. All right, so then you do photo reenactments.
Yes.
Okay, what is that exactly?
About 2015, one of my friends from York and a couple of Gettysburg friends, I said, well, let's go down to Hanover Junction, where President Abraham Lincoln, was there. And whether or not he got off the train, that's still debatable.
Right.
But they have a nice little museum there. So we went there. And one of my friends from York said, we ought to reenact that photo of, is it Lincoln or not?
Right.
I'm like, yeah, okay. So the more I thought about it, there's another photo of about 19 people on the train platform. I'm like, well, I could do both. So it took me a while, but I worked with the York County Commissioners, the York County Parks and Recreation Department, the Steam into History excursion train, and we did it on November 12th of that year with President Abraham Lincoln reenactor. I can't think of his name off the top of my head. I hope he'll forgive me. So we had all that. So
now, is he as tall as Lincoln?
No.
Okay.
No.
Because I wonder if you, and this might be, I might be oversimplifying it, but if you got a guy who is as tall as Lincoln and put him where Lincoln, quote unquote, is in the picture, if that would help decide if that was Lincoln or not.
And that's exactly the point that we were looking at.
Okay.
We looked at the photo and we had the individual posed there.
Yeah.
And the discussion about it with the original photo, if that's him, now we're here and we're looking at the size of the windows and the height of the windows. No way is he lower than the guy in the photo is shorter than the picture, the window frame.
Okay.
So it can't be him.
Okay.
And another issue that Scott Mingus brings out is neither of President Lincoln's two secretaries mentioned Lincoln getting off the train to speak to them. So it's just an interesting thing. But that was the first
Lincoln
one.
wasn't the only guy to wear one of those hats.
No. No.
I think people think that he was the only guy walking around with one of those hats.
But that was the first one. And then we started doing others. One of my favorites was doing the dedication of the 20th Maine Monument. Mm-hmm. And we had George McFarlane, who is a Joshua Chamberlain, historian and reenactor. He participated. And we had a licensed battlefield guide participate. And all these reenactments that I do, we match everything up as best as we can. We even had a flag made to imitate the one that's in the photograph.
Okay.
And we position everybody, and we get it all lined up, and we get the permit from the park. We get all that approved. And everybody is in attire, proper attire. We match them up and say, okay, you look like this one. This is where we're putting you. And put your arm this way. It's very detail-oriented, and it's a lot of work, but a lot of fun. And that's just 2 of them. We've done a couple, maybe 5 or 6, and then COVID hit, so we had to take a 2-year break. We're hoping to do one next year.
What are you going to do?
It is in front of the, we'll have to use the Rogers House or the Sherfy House, whichever one. It was the one where Sickles held court at the reunion.
Okay.
And I have a lot of battlefield guides lined up for some of the spots. So we have to use the one house that's there to use.
Now, do you have someone who does wet plate photography come out and do this, or are you using modern cameras?
These are all modern cameras. We considered doing that with someone else, but it was cost prohibitive.
Yeah.
But the photographer that we used and can still use, the new photographer, he does the photos in color, black and white, and sepia. And everybody gets a set of the photos, and that way they can print off whichever ones they want.
Yeah.
And we rotate people in and out if we need to for the different locations. So.
Right. And then metal detecting and archaeological digs, you've gotten into that as well over the years.
Yeah, I'm not really into metal detecting as much as some of my friends are, but 2 descendants of General A.P. Hill contacted me 2 summers ago, and they said they would love to do some metal detecting. So I set it up with a friend of mine who had taken me around before, and we did some metal detecting there near the Black Horse Tavern, which is a very hot. It was a hot spot for that type of thing. I don't want to
entice people to go out there. Yeah.
But
it was. It's not anymore. You've taken everything.
Well, we spent.
It's nothing for you to find people.
After we rebuilt some of those stone walls, we spent some time, about 6 or 8 of us, with metal detectors, and we didn't find anything.
Yeah. I mean, I would imagine that a lot of the places have got to be stripped by now.
I would think. I can't guarantee it, but
not obviously the park, but a lot where these neighborhoods are. I mean, to build them, they would have had to have unearthed a lot of stuff.
Right.
Especially the ones behind Seminary Ridge. Well, I forget what that neighborhood's called over there, but you know what I'm talking about. So,
well, there was one location where we were very successful. It was down at a bed and breakfast south of Gettysburg, which was a field hospital like so many farms were. And we found troves and troves of bullets, buckles, horseshoe nails, you name it. And we gave the owners first right of everything, but everybody else got something.
Right.
So
there was, I won't say where, but I knew someone whose property bordered the park. So we got to go metal detecting on their side of the fence. And I mean, every time you put the thing down, you're picking up something. Shells, shell fragments, drop bullets. I mean, everything. And it was really cool to be able to do that. I never got into it, but I've done it a couple times and found stuff, and it's pretty neat to when you finally find whatever it is that the metal detector was honing in on, and you go, wow, like no one has seen this in 158 years or whatever. So it's a pretty cool feeling that you get.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Now, books. Not only do you write newsletters 4 times a year, but you also write books, or you've written a book. How many books have you written?
Well, I've co-authored one. I'm co-authoring a volume 2, but I've helped edit, co-write, proofread maybe 6 or 8 books. I'm doing that for 2 other books now.
Okay.
In addition to the book that we signed the contract for a volume 2, which will come out hopefully next year.
Now, I didn't ask you this early on, but I should have. Do you have a background in history? Did you go to school for history? Are you a historian? What did you do for most of your life professionally?
Well, I got a degree in international studies.
Okay.
My goal was to work in the U.S. State Department.
Okay.
But it didn't pan out.
Okay.
And I had the college loans to pay off, so
Sure.
I did home improvements.
You had your own company?
Well, at first it was for the guy that I worked over the summer for.
Right. Okay.
And then he had to retire because of a health issue, and then I got thrown into the business cold turkey, and I had my own business for 10 years. And then I was able to, although it wasn't the U.S. federal government, I was able to get into state government, working for a House member, a couple of Senate members, and then a couple of different Senate offices, policy development and research, which comes in handy when you're looking into how do you find stories of this,
right?
The details.
And this book that I'm holding here is Texans at Gettysburg. You and Joseph L. Owen wrote it here. Blood and Glory with Hood's Texas Brigade. And it's cool because the chapters are broken up according to by regiment. So you got 1st Texas, 4th Texas, 5th Texas, 3rd Arkansas, and then you have the general's correspondences, the speeches, and the other Texans at Gettysburg. Those are the chapters there. We're going to have you on at a later date to talk about this so that I could read something from it and we can actually have something to talk about. But briefly, what got you into this particular subject? Why did you co-author this book?
Well, remember when I said my wife says you've got to do something with all of that information?
Uh-huh.
When I registered the domain name battlegettysburgbuff.com, I also smartly purchased the battlegettysburgbuff.net.
Mm-hmm.
So with that website having to do the annual registration fee or whatever, my wife said, you got to come up with a way to pay for
the website.
So I did another website, and it was my e-commerce one, where I had promoted all of these paying tours that had the battlefield guides or authors. I also was selling specific books, some artwork, that type of thing that I knew was you're not normally going to be able to find, but a lot of people will be interested in. So that's how that came about. And I had Joe Owen, who's a park ranger in Texas at the Lyndon Johnson Historical Site, said he had seen my websites, both of them, and said he was looking for a particular book on this topic, that topic, or whatever. So if I didn't know it, I contacted Bernadette Atkins, a good friend of mine who had the Battlefields of Beyond bookstore in the old Gettysburg Village. So I said, well, I'll send it to her and we'll see. So every time she was able to come up with the book or where to get it. And after a while, he said, I'm actually writing a book myself. And I said, well, that's cool. I said, I've helped edit, proofread 5 or 6 books, for people regarding Gettysburg. I said, I'd be happy to do that. So when he got all that done, he said, would you like to be the co-author? I said, why? In case there's something wrong, I'm the one you can blame.
You get half the blame, yeah.
And he said, no. I said, okay. So that's how that book all came about.
Okay. And it's basically accounts from each of these regiments, or because I'm looking here, Private J.M. Polk, 4th Texas Infantry. These are their accounts of the battle?
Yes. Letters, newspaper articles that they quote on or what have you. And they start with the commanding officer of each regiment, and then I work down the ranks. So I end up with the privates accounts at the end. It just made sense to, rather than try to do it alphabetically. But it was very interesting reading and seeing what research he had come about with. And there are I have two very favorite accounts.
I was going to ask you, give me some accounts, so go ahead.
Okay. Well, the one is where a Texan says, on our campaign into Pennsylvania, the Army of Northern Virginia did something they had never done before. It had been in 4 states in one day. And he goes into the fact that they started the day in the state of Virginia, marched through the state of Maryland, moved into Pennsylvania after they had crossed the Potomac. And because they had been given gills of whiskey after crossing the Potomac, the teetotalers were able to, gave them to the soldiers that drank.
Right.
And he said, and we slept in a state of intoxication. So those are the 4 states.
Right.
So that's my favorite.
So that was one of Hood's Texans who said that.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good.
The other one is very sad, and it always brings, I choke up.
You should have started with that one.
I can't.
Okay. But go ahead.
But a soldier says we were marching through, say, Frederick, and he had, a woman came out and started walking alongside and said, "Where did you get that knapsack?" And he said, "I took it off a dead Yankee in Chancellorsville." He said, "That was my son's." Because it had the name, rank, regiment, whatever. He said, "I stopped and took everything out and gave it to her."
Yeah.
That's the first time I didn't choke up.
Yeah. Well, that's a tough one. Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
But that's the
Those are the types of stories.
Yeah. That's the horror of the war, though. It's a civil war. It's, you're going to be marching, well, maybe not always, but in this case, you're marching into the enemy's territory as they were marching into yours, but you're all the same language, same religion, essentially, and you could bump into someone's mother who, all right.
So that's the humor and that's the sadness, and then everything in between.
Okay. We're going to have you back on to talk about this more in depth because this is an interesting one. People are always asking about Confederate stuff. Can you do Confederate stuff? And you're the first person that I've gotten my hands on who can do anything about Confederates. So we're going to do that.
Great.
Okay, so the website is the Battle of Gettysburg, or not the battle, just Battle of Gettysburg Buff. I'm sure a lot of you are aware of it already. Check it out. And the book is Texans at Gettysburg. Get a hold of it. You can get it on Amazon.
Yes.
Is it in any of the stores in town? Is it for the historian?
It was there.
Okay.
I don't know if they can get it. We're trying to get the publisher to do another reprint because they went so fast.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, very, very happy. And people that found out about the book contacted us and said, "Oh, I have an ancestor who was in the Texas Brigade. Here's my account of my ancestor or photos."
Right.
So Joe got so many responses that we have another book coming out next year.
Like a volume 2.
Volume 2.
That's great. So listeners, if you check it for the historian first, because if you mention Addressing Gettysburg, you can get a discount there. But if they don't have it there, then you can find it on Amazon and get a hold of it because I've been thumbing through it and it does look very interesting. So get a hold of this book. We'll have Randy on to talk about it in, I don't know, a couple weeks, month or so maybe.
That's fine.
Yeah, okay. And that's about it for now. So I just wanted to introduce you all to Randy because, like I said, it's probably a name you've seen before. Maybe you've met the fella. Maybe you've gone on some of his tours. Maybe you've used his website for reference. Now you know the man. Now you've seen the face, and we're going to get to know him in depth over the course of the next few months, talking about his books and maybe some other things that he does. Is there anything else you want to share? One more thing, I think, right? You have
a teaser for Volume 2.
Go ahead.
All right, let me pull it up here. I don't have this one memorized.
All right. So this is an anecdote that's out of Volume 2.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Everybody knows General James Longstreet, right?
That's right. We've heard of him.
This is from Private S.O. Young of the 5th Texas. It comes from true stories of old Houston and Houstonians, historical and personal sketches from 1913.
Okay.
His account, Best Fighter in the Army, by Private S.O. Young, 5th Texas. The other day, I told about James Longstreet, the famous mule that was the mascot of Hood's Texas Brigade. Soon after the article appeared, I met with Captain Matt Ross, who was a member of Company H, 5th Texas, and he jumped on me for not having mentioned another equally famous member of the brigade, another James Longstreet. That was a little red rooster, the pride and glory of Company H, but the immediate property of Matt Ross and Major E.G. Gorey, now a resident of Huntsville. That rooster was the greatest little fighter in the Army in Northern Virginia, said Matt. That is how he got his name. He would fight anything that had feathers on it, and when he got stirred up, he would tackle a man or anything that got in his way. Why, it is a matter of regimental history that our rooster kept Ed Gorey and me in ready money for a year or two. There was no rooster anywhere that could stand up in front of him. He whipped everything and never put on the least bit of airs over the fact. He had one eye got knocked out in one of his battles, but that did not seem to interfere with his fighting qualities. I really believe it helped him, for it had a kind of demoralizing effect on the old roosters to have Jim facing him with only one eye. They were not accustomed to that kind of advance. We kept him in perfect condition, and while we had no gaffs, we took charcoal and rubbed down his spurs so they were always bright and sharp as needles. Ed Gorey and I thought as much of that rooster as though he had been our son. We took turns in carrying him when we were on the march, and if we had only one handful of corn for our ration, Jim got half of it. He was always in some trouble by being too familiar with me. Usually he roosted on me by lying on top of me and took a notion to roost on Jim Langston, who was perfectly bald. About daylight, Jim Longstreet woke up and stepping over Jim's bald head, he threw back his head and sounded reveille. Now, if Jim had remained quiet, nothing would have occurred, but instead of doing so, he made a grab for Jim Longstreet, who, in his haste to get out of the way, closed his claws and cut 3 or 4 long gashes on his head. He jumped up and, grabbing his gun, tried to shoot Jim.
Oh.
It was all we could do to keep him from shooting Jim, but finally we got him quieted down. All right, and then I'll just fast forward here.
No, you don't need to. I like where this is going.
Oh, all right.
I like hearing about Jim Longstreet, the rooster.
When we went down to the peninsula, Jim went with us and won a small fortune for us. For we met some North Carolina troops down there, and they had some fighting chickens with them. One great secret of our success was that Jim was mighty deceiving in his looks. He was mild-mannered, and to look at him, you would not think butter would melt in his mouth. He would walk about looking as if he would rather eat than do anything else, and would actually pretend not to know what we were talking about when we were trying to arrange a fight. He was awfully cute that way. But after he found out that we had covered all the money the other fellows could take, his whole manner would change, and he became a warrior at once. It would have gone done your heart good to see Jim going into battle with his head on one side so he could get a focus on the other fellow with his one good eye and picking out the exact spot he was going to puncture. Ed Gorey and I had as much faith in that rooster winning as much as we did in General Lee, and neither one of them deceived us. We would follow Lee anywhere, and we would bet our last dollar on Jim Longstreet. It is rather remarkable that both of our favorites, Lee and Jim, should have met their first reverses at Gettysburg. General Lee had taken us into Pennsylvania, and we had taken Jim Longstreet with us, of course. When I realized what a big fight it was going to be at Gettysburg, I took Jim back to the commissary wagons and gave him to Jim Stanger of Company A, who was acting commissary clerk. I told Jim that from the look of things, there was going to be hell to pay, and some of us were going to get hurt. I told him if anything happened to me, to give it to Ed Gorey, and if anything happened to both Ed and me, that he could have the rooster. But he must promise to take good care of him. We had been in the fight all the morning when the fire grew so fierce that we could hardly hold our position. So many men had been killed and wounded that our line was dreadfully thin and weak. Colonel Powell ordered me to go back and bring every available man to the field. And those who were wounded, even those who were wounded but not entirely disabled, I went back and got about 20. I went as far as the wagons, and there I saw Jim Stanger. He was almost crying and pointed to a wrecked wagon and several dead horses. "Matt," he said, "poor Jim Longstreet is gone. A little while ago, a stray shell landed square on that wagon.
Oh.
And you see what it did. Jim was roosting in the wagon, and the shell did not leave a grease spot on him." "You see," said Matt, "he died the death of a soldier and warrior. I know that if he had been given the choice of death, he would have taken what he got. After I'd gone back to the firing line and broken the sad news to Ed, we lay behind some rocks and discussed the matter. We finally concluded that the shell had come up on Jim's blind side and us caught him, for we knew he would have gotten out of the way if he had seen the shell. Jim Longstreet, the mule, was all right in his way, but at best he was a camp follower and a loafer. When Jim Longstreet, the rooster, was an ornament to the regiment and a producer. After we had camped near any other troops for a few days, there was not a dollar left among them, for Jim would whip any chicken they could produce. The loss of Gettysburg was a sad blow to General Lee, but the loss of Jim Longstreet just naturally knocked the stuffing out of Ed Gorey and me. It was a great financial disaster. That's my
a good one.
story.
I like that. That's good. That humor of that whole story is what I love about reading about soldiers and reading from soldiers, what they've written and stuff, because you got to have that messed up sense of humor, you know? And that's pretty funny stuff. All right. So like I said, folks, get the book For the Historian first. If you can't find it there, then go to Amazon.com. It's called Texans at Gettysburg by Joseph L. Owen and Randy Drace. Drace, excuse me. Blood and Glory with Hood's Texas Brigade. That is the subtitle there. Randy, thank you very much for this second attempt at doing the show. And we've done it without losing power.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, and I enjoyed it immensely.
You're welcome. I did too, and we'll have you back on very soon. Thank you.
Great.
And thank you all for watching. All right, there we are. That was it.
Didn't lose power.
Didn't lose power. The heat is working, though.
Oh, my God, yeah.
Jesus